Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Wow, thank you all so much for coming out. We've got a really lively conversation, I'm going to call it that, planned for you this afternoon about a cuisine that may be sort of new to a lot of you, because I will tell you that when they asked me to lead this conversation, I was super excited because it's not a cuisine that I know that much about. And when I got a copy of Anna's beautiful book, I was super excited to delve into it. But I think the place that we need to start is certainly what we all hear in the news about Ukraine. Well, we're going to come back to that later on in our conversation, but putting it in its geographical place, I think, is really important for us to start with, because as I was starting to read through this book, all of a sudden I realized that there were a lot of influences in Ukrainian food that I didn't sort of expect. And so we all can relate it to Russian food because that's on one side of Ukraine. But then when you think about that, it borders on the Black Sea, and you've got all of those countries around that sea that go down into Bulgaria and Turkey, and you start to in Georgia, and you start to see those kind of influences coming in this cuisine. I thought that was a really good place to start. So when you talk about Ukrainian food, how do you describe the intersection that you find there?
Hi everybody. I'm so happy to be here. Ukraine has the most fortunate and the most unfortunate location. We have a lot of neighbors, and a lot of those neighbors were great empires once. So Ukraine was conquered, and it was teared apart, and a lot of those cultures left its mark on Ukrainian cuisine. Why we have a fortunate location is because we have two seas in Ukraine, Black Sea and Azov Sea, and we have the most amazing land, the most fertile land, so we can grow anything. You can put a stick just in the soil and it will just blossom. So that's why we have one of the best produce in Europe, and that's why we have so many grains. But at the same, and of course that builds our culture, culinary culture, and our dishes and menus. But again, we have so many countries that tried to conquer Ukraine over these years, and they left their recipes with us, and we kept the best. I'm promising you. And when you travel through Ukraine from east to west, you will see that the culinary culture will change. On the eastern side, it's more Russian, it's more Soviet, I would say. And then you travel and you discover these beautiful canteens, beautiful bakeries, and it's more European in a traditional sense of this world, like beautiful pastries, these coffee shops, everything is so lively and so elegant. So you got the idea. And when you go closer to the sea, you will see the Jewish influence. You will see Turkish influence, because we have, once we had Crimea, we had a lot of those flavors there. And hopefully they will come back to Ukraine very soon. And I wanted to celebrate that in Budmo, because I wanted to show that Ukrainian cuisine is vibrant, it's fresh, it's comforting, and at the same time it has all those different elements that can coexist in Ukraine. It's not just borscht and dumplings, it's so much more.
But it is borscht and dumplings
Oh yeah,
too.
it is the heart of our
Don't want to
cuisine.
disappoint you there, okay? Okay, so you mentioned the name of your book, so pronounce it for us so that everybody can hear this.
The name is Budmo.
Budmo, and what does Budmo mean?
That means cheers. So, no, that means let us be in Ukrainian, but we use it instead of cheers, and it means let us be healthy, let us be together, let us be celebrating this moment. And that's one of the most cheerful words in Ukrainian, And that's how I wanted to represent this book. This book is about celebration. It's about celebration culture. It's about celebration family recipes and the community.
So you mentioned how incredibly fertile the land in Ukraine is, and I don't think that's just one of those sort of idle boasts, because I think every day on some newscast I hear about the fact that a lot of the stuff that is grown in Ukraine can't get out, or that people are not growing it because of one thing or another. And so it led me to go and investigate the amount that Ukraine produces. And I will tell you that before we started hearing Ukraine in the news every day, I never would have told you that Ukraine produced as much. What are the main things that are produced in Ukraine?
A lot of grains.
A lot of grains.
Lots of that. So it's mostly wheat. We also produce corn, which was brought to us by Khrushchev from the United States, and lots of sunflowers. We have the most beautiful sunflower fields, and we produce a lot of sunflower oil. And I used to go to Trader Joe's and just pick a bottle, just turn it, and made in Ukraine.
Made in Ukraine.
Not anymore. Now it's
Right.
Mexico, because we can not export that much right now, and we lost a lot of our fields, and half of them are mined, half of them are under occupation.
Yeah.
So it's very unfortunate.
But that whole thing about sunflower oil really surprised me a lot. And I had this wonderful opportunity to be in the southern part of France during the sunflower harvest. And it was really beautiful. And so I was curious, and I thought, I wonder if France produces the greatest amount of sunflower oil. But of course, no, it was Ukraine that does. And I can't even imagine how beautiful it must be during sunflower harvest in Ukraine. And we'll just hope that that'll all come back.
So I would surprise you. It's not that beautiful.
It's not.
I just came back from Ukraine, and the only thing I had in my head is I need this photo of a sunflower field, and I'm standing there having my best fashion moment. And I came there, and the sunflower fields were getting to get harvested. And how they harvest them, they let them dry right on the stalk.
Yeah.
So it's basically all dark and all gloomy, and everything is dry. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what I get. Like, no sunflower field photo. And then we traveled all over Ukraine. We haven't found even one. And then we were going to my hometown, and in the middle of nowhere, we found that one sunflower field that was blooming. It was beautiful. I don't know which crazy person planted it, because it was so out of season, and I got my photo.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. You haven't sort of like encouraged me to go to Ukraine during the sunflower harvest now, but I'm really taken with how fertile the land is there. And I'm also taken with how many different flavors came through in your chapter. That was all of the sort of dips and beginning things for a meal. And I want you to take us through some of those. But the one that I settled on, I told you that I'm cooking a big meal out of this book on Monday night. But the one that I settled on was the eggplant caviar, because it's got things like fenugreek in it, which a spice that I absolutely love. So tell us about what role all of those dips and snacky things play in Ukrainian cuisine.
Oh, they play big roles.
That's what I thought.
Basically, they are always on the table just to add some flavoring, something pickled, something tangy, because we have a lot of heavy dishes, comforting dishes with potatoes and meat, and like you always have potato and meat on the table, but you need to bring it back to life somehow. And by using these wonderful spreads and condiments, you just add the flavor. And I love that eggplant caviar, especially because this is the southern dish, and it's something that you will see on everybody's table during summer and fall. And when I went back home, my mom made it for me. And when I went to cook at the front line for our soldiers, this is what I made, because I wanted to bring a southern dish, because I was not able to come to the south before I went to the front line. And I was gathering all the ingredients from my trip to bring to them and cook with them. And I'm like, okay, if I'm not going to bring anything from the south, I'm bringing the recipe.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. And actually, I just told the soldiers to make it, because I was like cooking in the kitchen, and they were fire roasting the eggplants, and they just chopped everything for me. It was just lovely, and they loved that recipe.
So you said you could use it as a condiment. If you were going to spread it on something, what would you spread it on?
Piece of rye bread.
Of rye bread? I somehow guessed that that's what you were going to say. It sounds just, I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, when I make it, I'm going to do the same thing. So there are two things I found. One in that chapter and one in another chapter that I just have to bring out. So there is this thing in Mexican culture, culinary culture. And in fact, it sort of exists lots of places in the Spanish-speaking world that they call ensalada rusa, Russian salad. And I do believe it's in this book. And it's a whole bunch of vegetables with a creamy dressing, right? So how do you make a real one? Because in Mexico, honest to goodness, it is so popular to put out on buffets and stuff. You find it everywhere. And even though they call it Russian salad, it doesn't really taste very Russian there, because they just put a whole lot of pickled jalapenos with mayonnaise and then put that on boiled vegetables. And so that's your ensalada rusa. And people just adore it. It's like potato salad in a way. But tell us about how it's made in Ukraine.
So this recipe is very controversial. And I just need to say that this book was...
should I have called it Ukrainian salad instead of Russian salad?
No, it's not Ukrainian. So it has a long history, very twisted history. So when I was writing this book, it was all before war. It went to print before war. If I had my way and I foreseen the future, I would just remove it. First of all, because it's a Soviet dish.
Yeah.
This version I have in my book is from a Georgian chef, because in Georgia they make it lighter, they make it vegetarian, and they make it with fresh herbs, which I loved. So in my head, it's a Georgian salad now, Georgian potato salad. But the true story about this one is it was created in Russia. It was created by a French chef. Definitely not Russian flavors at all, but it was so lavish. It had like langoustines, and it had caviar and everything, all the expensive stuff. But then when USSR came, they like, okay, people are miserable. We want to keep it that way, but we want to give them something. We want to give them hope. And they brought back this salad. And with every year of USSR, the salad got more and more cheap and miserable. And this is what we get. But still, when you put potato and meat together with a creamy dressing, it tastes good.
What kind of meat?
You can put chicken breast, but what I grew up eating, and everybody in Ukraine, Russia, etc., grew up eating, is some sort of bologna, chopped and put into the salad. So it was very traditional to serve it during the New Year's Eve. Not anymore. I think in Ukraine everybody hates this salad. But what saved me is this salad is more Georgian, and I was smart enough to use a Georgian recipe, Georgian interpretation, and I like it more because it's more vibrant, it's lighter. I did not use the heavy dressing, and it has herbs, which makes it a little bit more healthier, if it's possible.
Okay, I've got two questions. One is, and we can do this one really quickly. What part of Ukraine is the Georgian influence the strongest?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
The thing is, we embraced Georgian cuisine, I would say maybe 10, 15 years ago. We always had Georgian dishes because we were part of the USSR, and if you will go to Tbilisi, any city in Georgia, you will find borscht everywhere. And same in Ukraine, you just travel to pretty much any city and you will find a Georgian cafe or a restaurant. And I think 10, 15 years ago, everybody understood that Georgian cuisine is incredible. And people started opening Georgian restaurants, bringing chefs. And mostly in Kiev, you will find a lot of fancy and like anything from fancy to just very simple restaurants. But I also had a wonderful, lavish dinner in a Georgian restaurant in Kharkiv, which is very east. So pretty much anywhere.
Okay, so how do you describe that cuisine sort of in contrast to, say, Russian cuisine?
Definitely, they use a lot of spices. It's more vibrant. It's more complex because it's very labor intensive, but it's simple to understand. It's nothing crazy. You will not eat Georgian food and think, oh, whoa, what is that? The flavors are somehow familiar, and they use a lot of herbs that Russian and Ukrainian cuisine don't use. Cilantro and basil, especially purple basil, just wonderful. And right now, cilantro is just slowly entering Ukrainian cuisine, just slowly, because I did not grow up eating cilantro, and when I came here,
But I noticed you have it in a lot of recipes in
because
here.
of Georgia,
Yeah.
and I came here and I embraced cilantro. I started to like it a lot, and now I came back to Ukraine and I see cilantro on the menu, but it's not something that most people will prefer. They will say dill or parsley. That's the main herbs. Cilantro is just
I
not there
noticed
yet.
that one of the dishes I've chosen to make for my dinner on Monday night has the parsley, the dill, and you put cilantro in there with those three, and I can't wait to taste that combination because that's not something that I have ever had before. So, Georgian dishes. What are the most famous Georgian dishes? So, if we went into a restaurant and we go, oh, that's a famous Georgian dish, what would they be?
Of course, hachapuri. Hachapuri is a flatbread with a lot of cheese, and it can be made in many shapes and forms. And sometimes, I think the most famous one is the one that's shaped like a boat with an egg and butter. And I have the recipe in the book, and this is one of my favorite recipes to teach people to make because it's simple, but everybody is like, wow, what is that? This is incredible. And everybody's so proud when they make it. And it looks incredible. And this is the most Instagrammable recipe ever.
That was the first page I turned down in the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in Ukraine, again, why this recipe is in the book, because in Ukraine, you can go and you can find this recipe because Georgia and Ukraine, I think we have a very similar spirit. And despite our government is not always on the same page, but people are supporting us. And I have a lot of Georgian friends. I traveled to Georgia to research for this book because I felt like I want to represent some of the recipes. And it was just lovely how they refused to speak Russian with me. And I was like, you are my brother. We spoke English. And I know that the country is suffering from Russian aggression, not the same way like Ukraine, but longer even. So I feel like we share the same spirit, and I'm proud that I have these recipes in my book.
Good. Well, the reason that I was drawn to that recipe right away is because I really love Turkish food, and they make something called pide in Turkey that is that same shape. And so when I saw it in your book, I thought, oh, that was the first tip off I had that there was a relationship between the cuisines of all around that sea. And then I looked at the way that you did it with a layer of the cheese and then covering it with the pastry and then more cheese on the top. And I was like, yeah, I could go for that. I think I could go for that. And you put the egg on the top of it, and that's super
Yes, and
cool.
then when everything is like melted, you just mix everything together and just like take a part of the bread and
Yes.
just dip and enjoy.
Now
This
I'm
is
really
incredible.
hungry.
Oh my God.
No, that's a good one. The second question that I had to do with what happened to Ukrainian food. You addressed this some in your book, but talk to us about what happened to Ukrainian food during that period from, I'm going to say it's like 41 or to 91, something like that, when Ukraine was part of the USSR.
Actually, it started earlier because we were part of the Russian Empire, and then once the Soviet Union formed, which was I think 1919.
1919. Okay, I
Maybe
was too
don't
late.
quote me on that. Maybe later.
Okay.
It was like somewhere around that. They decided that this is a huge territory. How do we unite everything? We need one cuisine for everybody. So we now Georgian cuisine will give a few recipes. Ukrainian cuisine will give a few recipes. Russian cuisine will give a lot of recipes, and a little bit of mishmash French dishes. I don't know. I know why, because they were admiring that cuisine so much. They could not represent it properly, but still. And then they thought, if we will erase the culture, the culinary culture of every country, and make something the same for everybody, then the country will be the same, and we will unite everybody. And in Ukraine, we were forbidden to publish Ukrainian cookbooks. No research, a lot of recipes were lost. A lot of culinary culture is so deep that we need to dig it out. And that's why right now a lot of chefs and a lot of culinary researchers, myself included, we are trying to understand what was Ukrainian cuisine before Russia, before USSR. And it's very hard because we have basically nothing that can lead us. We have a little bit, and we have our imagination, and I think we just need to find the base for it and then dig and create something unique. And this is the proper time to do it, to just create flavors based on those almost lost knowledge.
That's really, really fascinating to me because, if I'm not mistaken, they also outlawed teaching school in Ukrainian, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Everything was in Russian, and that's certainly one way that a culture will obliterate another culture. And same sort of thing has happened, I would say, with the Native American community, that they have, because their languages were so obliterated during many generations, with that, you often lose the cuisine. And then the availability of ingredients to make Native American dishes was pretty much obliterated as well, except for a few foragers. And now that community is trying to do exactly the same thing that you guys are doing in Ukraine, which is to go back, talk to the elders, figure out if they have memories of certain dishes and how they would go together, and sort of give them new life. But in that giving of new life, you're also going to give them new life in with let's just call it a modern look, because we eat slightly different than we used to eat. And good example is the cilantro in this book, that yeah, we're used to using that, and yes, it's used in Georgian cooking, and so now it makes sense that it's going to be in a modern Ukrainian cookbook.
Absolutely. So again, because of the USSR, it was very strict what you can grow and what you can't grow. So we have this all amazing land, and we cannot grow golden beets. We could not grow a lot of things that would make sense to grow. We had asparagus before it was cool, and then we lost it because of the USSR, because nobody understood it. It's like, why do you grow it?
Right.
Go grow wheat or something like that. So when the whole world was developing their cuisine, Ukraine was standing still. And right now, this is the time for us to create something, to collaborate, to learn modern techniques. And I see nothing wrong with embracing techniques from other countries. I want to see Ukrainian umami other than fermented stuff like pickles and dried mushrooms. I want Ukrainian misos. I want, which I had this creative project and I love it. I want to see more of that, more interesting concepts, more restaurants, more chefs. And I think we will see it in the next 10 years. I already saw it in Ukraine, and I'm excited to share it with the world.
Do you think that we're going to get some of that kind of Ukrainian food when our friends from Parachute open their new place?
I hope
There.
so. I'm
I
going
don't know if you
there.
guys know this, but that's coming up this next week, right? That in the
Yes.
space that they had, where they had wherewithal, they're opening a Ukrainian, because Johnny is he's Ukrainian,
Yes.
which is something new to me. I didn't realize that, and so do you think we'll see that kind of stuff there?
I hope so. So
That would
the
be super
restaurant
cool.
name is Anela, and I'm so excited. I extended my trip just to go there because I eat a lot of Ukrainian food, and nothing that I tasted in Ukraine is represented in here. So in Ukraine, it's all vibrant, exciting, modern. Well, not all, but a lot. And I think we need to bring it here, and hopefully Johnny will do it. And I'm beyond excited, and I highly recommend you to taste the food and text me on Instagram.
Yeah, that'll be great. Okay, so we have to talk a little bit about all of this stuff in the dumpling chapter, because I'm a carbohydrate freak, and so I spent more time in that chapter than in any of the other chapters. But I will say we first have to start talking about fresh cheese. How do you pronounce that fresh cheese, Sid?
Sir.
Sid? Okay. And I think that we have to let the audience here know that it is a cheese that is sort of like a lot of fresh cheeses in the world. So in the cuisine that I work in, it's a lot like queso fresco. It's sort of like a farmer's cheese. So you give a good recipe. It's super easy to make. And for those of you that have never made a fresh cheese, especially an acid set fresh cheese, you will find that it is probably the easiest thing you ever try, and you will feel like you have conquered the world. And it is really, really, it's sort of like a dry ricotta too. It's like there's a lot of stuff. So last Sunday morning, because I work in a cuisine where we make that cheese every day at our restaurants, so I was able just to take some home. And so I made the cheese fritters for our brunch for my wife and I last Sunday, and it couldn't have been easier or better. I mean, we just enjoyed every single bite of the cheese fritters. But if somebody, first of all, don't be afraid, okay? Make the cheese, okay? Don't be afraid. But if some people here are afraid, is there a cheese that you would recommend? Because you use it a lot in the book. And so is there a cheese that you would recommend that they could buy?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, you can buy this cheese in any Polish grocery store or Eastern European grocery store. You'll have a wide variety.
Okay.
Secondly, farmer's cheese, that's the closest one, or fromage blanc. The only thing to make proper cheese fritters, you need the cheese on a drier side.
On the drier side, for sure.
Yes, because otherwise, if it's very moist, you will end up with I don't know what.
They won't
mess.
hold together.
And
I
they
can
will
tell
not
you that,
hold
yes.
together. It will be a mess. So if you want to make that recipe, what you need to do is squeeze the cheese through the cheesecloth a little bit. So it needs to be dry. And yeah, I think this is a good place to start. And I was able to order farmer's cheese from my local Sprouts, and they deliver it, and it's nice. Eastern European stores, you have a lot of those, so you can just buy it. But it's easy to make, so get adventurous, make it. It's fun, and
It's
you
fun.
definitely feel like you conquered the world.
Yeah.
And then whey, you can use whey in so many dishes. You can bake with it. You can use it instead of milk for all the blinis and everything.
So it seems like there's two kinds of encasements for the dumplings. There's one that is a yeasted one and one that's not yeasted.
We don't call yeasted one dumplings. That's the thing.
I'm completely out of my element here. Okay, so teach us.
So we have dumplings is always not yeasted.
Not yeasted.
No,
Okay.
and you can call them pierogies. This is the most confusing thing I will say today.
Better you
So
than me.
here we go. Pierogies are what we know as dumplings, and we call them vareniki in most of Ukraine. And then the confusion begins. We have the yeasted pastry, which is fried or baked, and we call them pirogi or perishke, and in most of Ukraine. And in other part, we don't. And it's very confusing because a lot of Ukrainians use Russian language, and pirogi in Russian means something completely opposite to Polish pirogi. And that's why it's still in our language, it's still in our vocabulary. Totally confusing. I try to explain it in my book for people who don't know. I'm not sure if I did a great job because I'm like explaining it right now. It's confusing for me as well.
Okay, I'm going to just go back and say there's these things that have a yeasted dough, and there's these other things that have a non-yeasted dough. Okay, and the non-yeasted dough, what's a famous example of that? There's the little ones, right? There was in your book.
Okay, so we have a couple.
See, I shouldn't have even asked this question.
This is the most complicated
I'm still
question.
trying to understand it.
So we have a few. The ones that shape like half moons.
Yes.
Okay, they are vareniki, dumplings, aka pirogi.
Okay.
Polish pierogi, very close. Like we share that dish, and we don't even argue who created that. I try to understand. I watched this lecture of this famous Polish culinary researcher, and he said, I don't know. I'm like, okay, if you don't know, I'm fine. And then I have these lazy dumplings, a couple of recipes of lazy dumplings, and they are lazy for a reason. So you don't roll the dough, you just mix everything together, drop in a boiling water, and they float kind of like a gnocchi-ish situation.
Yeah.
So that's the lazy part. And with the yeasted stuff, it's completely different story, different technique, different dough, everything is different, but as delicious, I promise.
I'm going to make one of the yeasted ones. Okay. Okay. So we need to talk a little bit. We've covered the basics of the book, except that you do have to talk about your the duck dish that's in there. Let's talk about that for just a second. Then we're going to launch into something else.
Okay. So everybody's asking, what's the favorite dish? Mm-hmm. And the answer is always the same. My grandma's roasted duck. It is so good. It is very easy to make. And this is what I make on Thanksgiving. I don't make turkey. I make this duck. And this is the easiest duck ever. So you roast it whole. You need this Dutch oven that will hold the duck. I have this huge old one that is wonderful. And it is always with apples because that's how my grandma made that. And I think apples create this lovely balance, and you can serve duck with that apples. You can make a sauce out of that, or you can serve those slices. And the duck is so juicy. It is so beautiful, and it's just the most easy way to, except for hachapuri. This is the second most impressive dish that you will just carve at the table and people will say, wow, this is incredible. And you don't spend any time making it. You just rub it, put it in the oven, roast it, and it's just done.
Beautiful. Okay, so now we have to kind of circle back and talk about the state of Ukraine today. We know you can't turn on the news without hearing about the war between Russia and Ukraine. And I guess my question is, you've just returned from Ukraine, so give us the lay of the land. What's it like in Ukraine right now, and what's this? I'm really interested in the state of this emerging cuisine or the preservation of this cuisine. And are you noticing? Well, answer that. What's the state of it right now?
So weirdly enough, people are more creative than ever. Mm-hmm. I feel like war created that background for people to just, I'm just going to do what I want to do because there might be no chance for tomorrow. So I'm doing it right now. I visited a lot of restaurants. I cooked with a lot of chefs, and what I saw is incredible creativity. So right now, Ukrainians are so traumatized and damaged by this war, and we don't want anything Russian. We just want our own. We want our peace. We want our cuisine. So basically, if you refuse to eat Russian dishes and you refuse to eat Soviet dishes, what do you eat? And people want to eat something that belongs to Ukraine. And they are digging deep. They are searching for ingredients that are native to Ukraine. They are searching for methods. They're searching for old recipes. And basically, it's not even recipes. It's just guidance. And with that guidance, they can create something unique and interesting. And of course, preserving stuff is something we've been doing in Ukraine for centuries, because we have all four seasons and we need to survive. We needed to preserve all the produce. And that created a basic, I would say, the base of our cuisine. So we preserve meat and fish and all of the vegetables, everything that grows on the sun, we can preserve. And when you incorporate those elements into cuisine, you create something very, very interesting. And when I traveled and I talked to chefs, I was always in the kitchen with them. And what I saw is these beautiful libraries of international cookbooks. And they're just getting the inspiration from other chefs and other cuisines and just trying to incorporate those practices into our modern Ukrainian cuisine. And honestly, that was interesting that they are creating this modern Ukrainian cuisine and they don't even know it, because they are so tired. And I came and I tasted the dishes and I'm like, wow, chefs, this is incredible. And they're like, thank you for saying that, because I don't know, we don't have energy, uh, we don't have anything to keep going. And just hearing that means that we do something nice, because we are so close to the action, we don't even know if we're doing something cool or not. I'm like, it's definitely cool.
That's really cool. So I guess my question is, if we want to support Ukraine in any way, what would you recommend? I mean, besides us cooking from your book and going to, what's the name of the new restaurant here?
Anela.
Yeah, okay. How can we support?
So I traveled through the whole Ukraine and I've been at the front line. And people who took me to the front line, they are from International Aid Legion. So this is an organization of volunteers, and they are so incredible. They are foodies as well, and they just I arranged everything during my trip. Everything was perfect, but this one tiny details that was the most important to me, to go at the front line and cook for our soldiers. And I had no arrangements because I didn't know anybody. And those people, they arranged everything in 30 minutes, because they helped those soldiers so much that the soldiers just welcomed me with open arms. They helped me. They peeled whatever needed to be peeled. They washed the dishes. They did everything because those people are helping them. And I used to think that I can help multiple organizations, but now I feel like I need to focus my energy. And right now, what's happening in Ukraine is that our soldiers are facing a lot of difficulties because Russia is attacking from multiple directions, and we are struggling with our counteroffensive. And our military guys need all the support because they are the ones that protect us and that they allow people to have some sort of a normal life, if you can say that. And International Aid Legion, they're my personal friends. I support them, and they evacuated 24,000 people from the occupied territories and the territories that were freed from Russian occupation. And they are just my superheroes, superhumans, and this is the organization I support. And what I did in Ukraine as well is I didn't go straight to Ukraine, because you cannot do that. I went to Amsterdam. I picked up, with my photographer, Jason Berry, we picked up an ambulance and we drove it all the way to Ukraine from Amsterdam to support our guys on the front line. We just gave that ambulance. And this is another organization I support. And It's a Dutch organization who's run by Ukrainians, and Zeiland, I will butcher it, von Vreeland, and they work with International Aid Legion together. And these are people I love because they deliver ambulances and cars and all the medical equipment to the front line, tourniquets and everything that is needed. They are just the best.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So we have time for a few questions. If anybody has those questions, thank you very much. Let's start over here, and we've got some microphones so we can all hear.
Danilo, from Chicago here. What part of or oblast are you from, and how would you describe the borscht from there?
So I'm from Mykolaiv region, Mykolaievska Oblast. It's the southern part of Ukraine. You ask how to describe borscht there? Oh my God. Oh yeah, I heard correctly then. So our borscht it's always with tomatoes. It's more red than purple, and it always have bell peppers when bell peppers are in season, and it's. My mom says that, first of all, the best borscht is tastes the best on the third day, not the first day. Borscht takes its time, and you need to make it so robust that if you will put a spoon in the pot, it will stand straight up. So the borscht is it is very, very comforting. It's very intense, definitely red, and tomatoes are must. Or it's either fresh tomatoes or tomato paste.
Other questions? Right back here.
About what is Ukraine. If you make a geographical center, I'm from Ukraine, you know, and if you make in study geographical and center of Europe is in Ukraine. It's western part of Ukraine, but this is center of Ukraine, of Europe. And by territory, it's second big country after France. And by population, it's the seventh biggest country in Europe. And Russians are still our history. They steal everything. But we are the center of Europe. We are a very European country. And we have dishes from all Europe, and we enjoy this.
Great, thank you. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thanks for doing this talk. I love it. I'm already really loud. I don't know if I didn't catch it or I did, but I have your cookbook at home, and I was wondering if you included holubtsi, or if you did not, and why not?
I have holubtsi in the book. They are a slightly different version than the one that we see usually. So usually they are stuffed with meat and rice and simmered in this wonderful, slightly acidic tomato broth. But what I did, because every Ukrainian cookbook has that one, and I'm like, okay, if everybody has it and everybody know how to make it, I'll do something different. So my holubtsi are vegetarian. They're stuffed with barley and caramelized mushrooms, and so yeah, it's still cabbage rolls, but the appearance is different, and it's more Western Ukraine than the rest of Ukraine.
Right back there.
Hi, my name is Katie. I follow you on Instagram, and I saw that you went to Kharkiv, and I just want to know what that was like when you went there, because it's so close to the border of Russia. So yeah, just curious.
Oh, I might cry right now. So Kharkiv is the one city I was not super excited about, because I was there once and it seemed very Sovietish to me, another grand Soviet Union city. And my photographer, Jason Perry, who was in Ukraine before me 5 times during this full-scale invasion, he's like, no, you have to go. We need to go to Kharkiv. I have so many friends, and the organization, International Aid Legion, which I was talking about, they are in Kharkiv. And I decided to go because I also talked to my friends, chefs who I met in Ukraine, and they said the best Ukrainian restaurant is in Kharkiv, the best Ukrainian chef is in Kharkiv. And anyway, I wanted to go to the front line and cook, so Kharkiv was a destination for me. And we went there, and it was incredible. First of all, because the city changed. Now it's my favorite city in Ukraine. It is so resilient. It just amazed me. They refused to give up. They refused to, and it was a Russian-speaking city. It was very pro-Russian at some point, and then they said, we are Ukraine, we are Ukrainians, we are not giving up. And most of the people are speaking Ukrainian right now, which was shocking to me. And I went there the first day. I decided to walk very close to the curfew time, and I'm like, I need to walk. And I got the siren started, the air siren, and they started Russia started bombing Ukraine, and I was outside just watching it. And I felt like I've arrived, I'm home. And the next day we went to the front line from Kharkiv, and it was just the most incredible thing I've ever done in my life. I talked to those people, and like the whole day was like all about logistics and cooking and shopping before the dinner. And then we came back tired, and we went to that restaurant. The name is Tripitcha. And the chef, Mikita, just welcomed me, and we talked about Ukrainian food and what we want to do with it and how we want to spread the word. And we felt so connected, even we live so far away, but we have the same ideas and we want to help Ukraine the same way. And I feel like I left my heart in Kharkiv. So thank you for asking that question, because it's one of my favorite cities now.
I think we have time for one more question.
Vladimir. So we talked about dumplings, vareniki, but what are galushki? Is that the yeasted ones? Or is it a totally different thing? Or is it the synonyms?
Okay, so we can say halushki.
We're back to the dumpling question.
Always. It's always goes back to dumplings. So technically, we can call halushki dumplings, but they are not. So the dough is softer. They are boiled, and the dough usually is kind of semi-liquid. So when you drop them into hot boiling water, they just form, and you serve them with some sort of toppings. So you don't stuff them usually. And one of my favorite dishes to make is soup with halushki. So you make this wonderful, rich broth, and you add potatoes and tomatoes and anything you want, and then you drop those dumplings into the simmering broth, and they just float on top, and you serve it like that. And this is one of the dishes that are native to my region, and that's how we make it, and it's just delicious. And I have a recipe in the book. What a coincidence.
Good. Well, Anna, thank you so very much for spending the time with me, and thank you for opening my eyes to such a remarkable cuisine.
Thank you so much, Chef. Thank you.